Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast. This is actually, Wale, I've written in my notes here, I didn't mention this before, that this is a special episode. 100 apparently. I literally just popped that in my notes, yeah. Should have mentioned that before, Wale, but yeah, put you on the spot. It's episode 100 of the Daily Palace podcast. We've got here. How have we done this? Yeah. Any highlights, Wale, for you of episode 100?
It's quite interesting because there's one part of me that thinks, oh, has it been 100 already? But then there's another part that remembers, towards the end of the season when this. When a couple of us were recruited, and then the idea was floated by the guys in the network, and it does feel like a long time ago, to be honest. And to have done 100 episodes, what it means is we would have done. Of course, the plan is to do an episode every day, but there's been days where, say, it's international break, and we've just said we'll just take a couple of days off, but 100 episodes is a lot. And I remember just when we had the chat, the 4 of us originally, and then 5 when I think Dan was the last to join in.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then, to be honest, fair play to Dan, is probably taking it more seriously, like than the rest of us. And then Finn, sadly had to do other things, but it's been great, knowing you guys. We've had some interesting conversations beyond, the pod. But as far as the pod is concerned, it's a process that is growing. The hope is that in some months we'll be talking about hundreds of episodes, and we'll be talking about great listenership base and a lot of amazing guys following. I know this, as I said, it's a process that's growing. It's as a network itself, the Global Sports Podcast Network is growing as well. I remember it's all the Premier League teams and the Women's League, and then there's guys doing in Italian and Spanish and Saudi Arabia, and then there's, I think, the cricket as well was talked about at some point. So it's a growing brand, and it's pretty exciting, and it's something personally I enjoy doing it because it takes me away from serious work, and of course this is serious business as well. But then talking football, and I now find myself, as you know, I'm a Liverpool fan, and my love for Palace is just out of the fact that Victor Moses played for Palace. A couple of African guys played for Palace, and I've watched Palace, and I love the couple of players, and I thought, well, I'll do Palace. It was supposed to be challenging for me because I didn't want to do Liverpool, who I was a fan of. I thought, I'll do Palace. That's a team I can relate with, and to be honest, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Awesome.
Nice one. Yeah, it's just it's like you say. It seems like it's gone very quick that we've got to 100.
How's it like for you, considering, because I know you, Dan, Finn as well but you guys are Palace fans and you've watched Palace, all the time. So it has to be difficult because when I come on a podcast, there's a part of me that's, I love Palace, but there's a part of me that's doing it as a job or as something I need to do. And sometimes I can take, Palace might have lost scandalously 5-0 to Arsenal.
Thanks for the reminder.
But you have to deal with that emotionally and then still do the pod. And not just that, but see, like, some nights when Palace have won a game and you're having a drink or two with your friends, but then you've had to record the pod as well.
Mate, yeah, I find obviously it's just natural conversation, isn't it? Because the conversations I have with you guys on here is the same that I'd be having with my friends who are Palace fans and my family. And it's just that same stuff, really. Whatever I've said to them, I say to you guys on here, basically. So it's very natural for me. But yeah, it's hard to put the emotion to one side, I must admit, especially when we're losing, because you can see, especially with this team, you can see the potential that we have. And like we underperformed at the start of the season, it's so frustrating to sort of have to relive all the mistakes and like all the all the highlights, like preparing for each pod, it's like, oh my God, like, do we really have to watch that again? But yeah, mate, just talking about Palace is like, it's a bit of a dream for me, to be honest. Like I was saying to you before, like I cover football, but it's like big European stuff, and like the bigger teams like Liverpool and Arsenal and that, they obviously get more of the headlines, but it's just nice to have a bit of an outlet to talk about Palace and like discuss things. Like transfers, all the ongoings, and like now that we're doing quite well, it's actually really nice to do it. But yeah, those first few months of the season were tough, man. I'm not gonna lie. Having to talk about like losing to like Everton and stuff like that.
Back-to-back games, by the way.
Oh right, yeah, it's just yeah, it's all coming back now. But yeah, it's we're doing all right at the moment, which is good. So yeah, the way we wanted to start this pod before I actually checked that was that Wale, I wanted to ask you about our result last night in the FA Cup. So we'll just touch on that quickly because I know the guys discussed it yesterday. But did you manage to catch the game? What were your kind of thoughts on it?
Yeah, it was a good game. It was. I saw the game because it was the only. There were two games on yesterday, I think, but then it was the only one I was interested in. Incidentally, I didn't see the Liverpool Plymouth game, so I needed to see one. I saw Brighton Chelsea. I needed to see one more game, but it was a good performance. Although I've been seeing a lot of guys on other fora saying it was maybe a game Palace was expected to win, but then I think what does that even mean? Not just in football, but particularly in the FA Cup. What does it mean when you say that it's a game you should win? Although you can forgive them because Arne Slot was saying the Plymouth game was a game Liverpool should win, but obviously it's the FA Cup. That I'm not really sure there's games you should win. There's games you could win, man.
Yeah.
Because even Man City, I had to do it was hard work for them against Leighton Orient. I remember Man United who went on to win the FA Cup last season, struggling to beat was it Coventry in the
semi-final.
in the semi-final.
Yeah,
So
that was a really good game.
so it's that's what you get with the FA Cup and yesterday, I like the fact that Palace controlled proceedings, so to a large extent, created a number of chances. It's not very often the Palace, even when Palace win, it's not very often the Palace have the more possession of the ball. But that was the situation yesterday, and great goals. The free kick idea was fantastic.
Yeah.
The finish by Devaney was glorious, and it was a comfortable victory, so to speak. So it was a good performance for me, and I just looked and saw, oh, now there's 8 teams. Let's see what then happens with. The 16 teams rather. I'm mixing it up with the Champions League now because
we're not there yet, mate. We're not in the Champions League yet.
Now is the fifth round. Let's see what then if it turns out to be it's Millwall now. If you get a victory against Millwall, then if you get lucky in the next one, and then you could be talking about a semi-final in Wembley, and at that point, trust me, anything can happen. So
yeah.
It would be nice, for Palace to get a great cup run. I remember the FA Cup run the other time, so it would really be nice. But particularly about yesterday's game, it was great. The same players living up to the billing, giving a great performance. Munoz was fantastic. Mateta was fantastic. Devaney was great. It was nice to see Adam Wharton back to somewhat level where he would normally produce towards the end of last season when he joined. He's been very unlucky with injuries and loss of form and all that. So it was nice to have him back, particularly for me. Will Hughes' assist for the Devaney goal was fantastic. So it was just a great watch, and it wasn't one of those games that was completely one-sided where the other team didn't. It was a proper football game, and Palace got the victory. Yeah, you could say maybe it's a game they could have won, but come on, it was away from home. It's the FA Cup, and we know Palace are able to. have a terrible outing if they want to, but
Yeah,
yes, it was a good one, and
yeah,
I'm really pleased for the boys.
it was a pretty solid performance, to be honest. And like you said, there were a few upsets in the previous games before that on Monday, so it was a good win for us. We actually, in the previous round against Stockport, that was a lot tougher. So it just shows that, like, the big Premier League teams can struggle against lower league opposition. So to get through with a comfortable 2-0 is great. And obviously before the game, we knew that if we won, we would have Millwall awaiting at home in the 5th round. So that was probably a bit of a extra motivation. And I think Will Hughes said after the game, similar to what you said, Wale, is like there's sort of a belief amongst the squad that they can go far and perhaps get to the semi-final or the final at Palace. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, we've got to take it one step at a time, and the next big step is Millwall at home. Just quickly, Wale, some thoughts on that tie. What do you make of that?
Well, of course, it will be. As I said, with the FA Cup, you don't know. Anything could happen. It will be a game that will be tough, but Palace will be enjoying the benefit of playing at home, and hopefully that will uh, mean that the crowd is behind the team. Maybe that will add to the desire to get on to the next round, but it will be a difficult game. Definitely, Millwall are not. They're no pushovers. To be honest, I haven't seen them a lot. I'm just trying to double check something very quickly. I haven't seen them a lot, in a couple of games, but I know that they haven't had the best of seasons as to getting up, having the chance to get up and from the league. But I think last season they weren't as bad. They are 14th in the league, and they've had some great games as well. And they are also looking for a lot of these teams in the championship and below. An FA Cup run is something they know that happens. So there will be teams looking at Coventry from last season, for example, and saying that could be us. We could go to the semi final and make some good money from TV deal, from ticket, and all of that. So they will be wanting to do that. There's from the 5th round upwards, there is that added desire and energy from the teams in the lower sides, and it's always easy to go into a game as underdogs anyway. So that takes a lot of pressure off them. If they lose to Palace away, wouldn't be the end of the world. If they get a victory, that will be massive. And I'm sure they'll be saying to themselves, that's something we can do. But Palace, of course, I'm sure Glasner will be saying to the boys, don't look at yourself and think, you're the bigger boys, or you're better. We've always said that in the Premier League, the teams from about 12th to 20th could easily be playing in the Championship. So you need to approach this game like, you're playing. You can't afford to be complacent in any way. You have to, keep your feet on the ground and just approach it like you will any other game. And with Palace, the easier games are the more difficult ones, which is why I was particularly pleased with the result against Coventry. I mean Doncaster rather yesterday. So it will be an interesting game. It will be tough, but I'm back in Palace to get the job done. Depending on the form at the time, it's still a couple of weeks away the game. But if it's this form the Palace are, this run of form the Palace are on, then definitely they should be able to get the result against Millwall.
Yeah. I think Glasner said that he was like, there's still a couple of games in between, and he said he's focusing on those for now, obviously, starting with Everton at the weekend. But yeah, in terms of an occasion, it's for Palace, it's massive having Millwall at home, and unfortunately, I'm on holiday the weekend that it's on, so I'm not going to be going, and I'm absolutely gutted about it. I did look at getting some flights back from where I was going, but I'd rather just have the holiday, to be honest. Right, so that's part one of the Daily Palace pod. Stick with us after this ad break, where we'll be discussing Palace's away form. So stay with us. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Daily Palace podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waite, and I'm joined by Wale Bakari on our 100th episode of the pod. So we're just going to look at Palace's away form, Wale. It's very impressive at the moment on the road for the Eagles. We're actually the most in-form Premier League away side, taking 16 points from our last 18 on the road. It's better than any other team, which is quite impressive. And then there's been 4 successive 2-0 wins, capped with the Doncaster win last night, and 5 clean sheets in a row away from home. So it's all coming together for Palace away from Selhurst Park, Wale. But can you put your finger on anything that's clicked for the lads, or anything they've done differently? Like, how has it all come together, this impressive run of form?
Well, it does seem like we always knew Palace had a good performance in them, even at the start of the season, which accounts for the disappointment when results weren't going the way of the team. No disrespect to Southampton, for example. I'm not sure a lot of their fans, go into games thinking, "Oh, we're going to win this one." It's more about hoping that they get a result. Sometimes when you see the performance on display in games, but with Palace, even at the start of the season, the first couple of games, Brentford, West Ham, Leicester, it did look like what exactly is going on here. The boys could definitely have gotten better results in those games, and afterwards, it wasn't as if Palace were playing any badly. Yeah, there were games that Palace lost by the odd goal, and then the draws against United, Chelsea, Man City, even against Liverpool, it could easily have been, a draw, or maybe even nick the win. So Palace always had the performance in them, and it always looked like it was only a matter of time before things clicked. But we've also seen teams that are always not the worst in performance, but results just never come, and then the manager gets sacked, and then someone else comes in, and it just goes horribly for them, and before you know it, you're talking about a relegation battle. It was teetering towards that direction for Palace, but somehow the team rallied round and started getting good results. For me, it's been about the not just the away games. We've seen more desire. We've seen players put in. No disrespect to the level they were putting in the start of the season, but you just see players putting in more of a shift in games. Players go back to the performance level that we know they had in them at the start of the season. A lot of questions about Wale use, Tyrick Mitchell, questions about whether we could get defenders on the same level as Gay. Questions about whether Mateta could get the goals and whether Ismaila Sarr can, put in performances that you expect from him. But that didn't happen at the start. But over time, players started getting back to the form that we know they can get to, started putting in performances that we know they could get to, and it's all down to the will and the desire for me. And once that began to increase a bit, once they took that up a notch a bit, the results started coming. It took a while. There were a lot of draws, and Adford victory against Tottenham, for example. But the more comfortable results started rolling in, over time. So it just did look like. I don't know whether it was something Glasner said to the boys, or whether it was the boys having a look in the mirror and saying to themselves, "We definitely can do more than we've been doing." But once they showed more desire, and once it looked like they took things by the scruff of the neck, and they said, "Enough of this," and we want to go on a run of results, and that's exactly what they've done in the last weeks.
Yeah, it's been an amazing turnaround, really, from where we were. I think obviously you pinpointed the Spurs game, the 1-0 win at home, but I think it was perhaps the game before that, I think, at Nottingham Forest, where we lost 1-0, where we just performed so badly. And I think that was such a turning point in terms of, like, it was the lowest of the low. We went 8 games without a win to start the season, or it might have been even more than that. And it's just, you can't get much worse than that. So something had to change, and luckily it did. But yeah, everything just seemed to click. Like, players' performance levels are so much better than they were at the start of the season. Like, Munoz is back to how we saw him at the end of last season. Mateta's scoring the goals again. And we're also doing this without Eze as well. He wasn't, well, he played a part in the Man United win, but he wasn't on the pitch for 60 odd minutes. So everyone else is sort of, finding their level and finding their feet. So hopefully it can only continue for the rest of the seasons, but we'll see. We'll see how things pan out. Right, stay with us. We'll be back after this short ad break for part 3. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of the Daily Palace podcast. We're now going to look at a bit of transfer news, Wale, just to cap things off. We've mentioned him a couple of times in the pod already, like we always do. The main man, Philippe Mateta.
Especially when he's Joe on.
Yeah, every few minutes it is when Joe's on. He loves that guy. Philippe Mateta, our top scorer this season, has been linked with a move to Barcelona, and Man United are also interested, as are a host of other clubs. Other reports are saying that we're trying to negotiate a new contract for him. His current contract is up in 2027. It's a bit of a strange one, considering the transfer window's just shut for rumours to be swirling around this soon, Wale. But do you think there's any legs to this transfer rumour? Do you think Palace do need to get a new contract for Mateta over the line? What do you reckon?
Well, first of all, I should say, Alex, we, beyond the pod, we've got some media experience, and we know that sometimes, the media needs to find something to make some noise about.
There's only so much you can say about beating Doncaster.
And then I know that many years ago, the transfer rumor part of every publication or news website used to be something that happened towards January and after, and then towards the end of the season and during. But now it's something that happens all year round, and you need to find content for that part of your news. So sometimes certain things, but not to say that this is not something that can happen. Someone might have looked at Mateta and might have said to themselves, "That's from a Manchester United perspective, for example. When you look at what they have, Ireland, Zirkzee, aside from the fact that they're younger, and you could say, oh, you don't know what they will grow into, but Liverpool fans have said that about Darwin Núñez for so many seasons now.
Yeah, good point.
But you could still look at even Núñez's age and say, oh, you don't know what it will grow into, because I think there were talks about that a team wanted Darwin Núñez for 70 million. So they must be looking at how old he is. But so for Ireland and Zirkzee, for example, you look at their age, but if you look at their output, nowhere near what Mateta is getting. So someone could look at Mateta and say, if he's performing that way, around players in Palace, if he gets, maybe more quality players at Barcelona, I don't necessarily say at United at the moment, but maybe if he does that, he can get more goals. It's got Premier League experience. It could get more goals. Yes, that's a risk worth taking, especially if your strikers are not giving you the goals. But for Barca, for example, they've got Lewandowski at the moment, who doesn't look like he's aging at all. But I don't know what the plan is for those teams and what the agenda is for those teams. But speaking about Palace specifically, it would come down to what is the goal for the club? What's the ownership or the leadership of the club hoping to achieve? We know that he's able to get goals. We know that he's able to rally the team. He's in the scheme of things, you could call Mateta an invaluable member of the Palace squad. So, do you want to lose an invaluable member of your squad? The answer usually is a no, but in this market these days, there's also the question of how much are we talking about? What can we get, as a replacement? Can we get a better player, with a lower price than what we're getting from Mateta, or are they looking to make some investment for the future? Personally, I would look at Mateta and say, is one deserving of a new contract? Is one deserving of more help? Of course, if Eddie Nketiah hasn't gotten the goals that Palace expected, if, for example, he's got 10 goals this season already alongside what Mateta has, you can only begin to imagine where Palace would be, as a team. So at the moment, Mateta now seems like the most likely source of a goal for Palace, and you don't want to lose that. So as I said, it really is totally dependent on what the ownership of the club, the leadership of the club are looking at as the future of the club and what they want to do. Yes, you could say, oh yeah, if we let him go, if there's indeed clubs wanting him, question is how much are they willing to pay? What other players can the club bring in? We've seen clubs, sell players, get a lot of money, and then struggle to get business over the line in bringing in, other players. Some have had to wait for another season. Some are unable to do it. Some eventually get the man they want, and they just never, produce as much as they expect. So it's a very tricky thing. But personally, as I said, he's a man deserving of another deal.
Yeah, I think arguably he's probably the main player we need to sign. We just, as football fans, we just know how much of a premium a good goal scorer is in the Premier League, especially. And it's worth its weight in gold if you can sign someone like Mateta and hold him down for a few years, especially at a club our size of Palace. Like having a 15 to 20 season goal scorer is massive. And it does, like you say, it doesn't look like Eddie Nketiah is that person yet. Maybe he will turn into that because he's a bit younger. But Mateta is our main bloke at the moment up front, and we need him. All right, his contract's still got another year and a half or so, or another couple of years. But yeah, it's something we should be looking to get over the line. Like you say, though, these rumours are just a bit early days at the moment. But I do think, he is a player who will attract interest, especially if he keeps scoring goals. And it will be one to keep an eye on in the summer, I'm sure, along with a few of our other players who are out of contract, like Will Hughes, who has obviously been very good for us this season as well. Right, that's been the 100th episode of the Daily Palace podcast. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Wale for joining me today. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, Paul. Always a pleasure, Paul.
Nice one. And here's to the next 100 episodes. Stick with us for the rest of this week, where we'll be looking at more Palace news, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks again for listening.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.